Hello and welcome to Manger's Study. I am your host, CJ, and this is the first real episode on Project 2025. As I am recording this, it is the 17th of July, 2024, and there are 111 days, 30 minutes, and 37 seconds until Election Day. Until midnight on Tuesday, November 5th. Anyway, it's about 111 days until Election Day. This is my first episode for Project 2025. You can download the PDF from project2025.org. I'm not affiliated with them in any way whatsoever. If you want to follow along, although I'm going to try to make it where you don't have to. With that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into this 900 plus page behemoth. The Project 2025 book is called Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise. It is a collection of ideas from hundreds of volunteers. Not necessarily everything in there is endorsed by every contributor. The purpose of the book is to prepare conservatives for when the Republican, who we now know to be Donald J. Trump, takes office in 2025. Quote, indeed, one set of eyes reading these passages will be those of the 47th President of the United States, and we hope every other reader will join in making the incoming administration a success. Unquote. That seems a bit optimistic, we'll say, considering that something that is well known about Trump is that he doesn't, in fact, actually read books. This isn't my attempt to cast any kind of aspersions upon the guy. After all, he managed to get himself made president without bothering to read books. That's a pretty impressive accomplishment. I'm sure he reads this article or that paragraph or whatever, but in no world do I imagine that he will be reading this book. He will, if anything, have advisors who have read it telling him what they think about it. Mandate for Leadership is not new, apparently. It's something that has been done since about 1980. So it's not like this is a new thing. Most of what I've heard from various left-leaning places is that it's a manual for the conservative agenda, and here are the things wrong with the conservative agenda. Some of what I've heard or read seems shocked that there is a conservative agenda. When I heard or read those things, I'm mostly amazed about how ignorant some people can be. Like, have you never heard of white papers from conservative think tanks? Maybe they haven't, though. I live and breathe in politics, and if you don't, it's entirely possible that this idea is completely new to you. If that's you, no worries. Ignorance is no slur against you. It's just the state of being that most of us are in about most of the stuff that happens in the universe. It's fine. That's what I'm here for, and that's what you're here for. Project 2025's purpose is to grow an army of conservatives ready to go to Washington, D.C. on day one of the next Republican administration to implement conservative policy. It is composed of 4 pillars. Pillar 1 is the book that we're going through. It is the policy pillar. It, quote, puts in one place a consensus view of how major federal agencies must be governed, and where disagreement exists, brackets out these differences for the next president to choose a path, unquote. Pillar 2 is a list of people that the authors believe are capable of being in appointed positions of government. Pillar 3 is, quote, the Presidential Administration Academy, an online educational system taught by experts from our coalition, unquote. It's classes on how to govern and be part of the government. It's pretty cool. Pillar 4 is the playbook, and that's with a capital P, playbook, where they, quote, are forming agency teams and drafting transition plans to move out upon the president's utterances of "so help me God," unquote. After this introduction, we're giving a list of authors that I'm just going to skip through. I don't think there's any reason to read through all the authors. Let's take a moment, however, at this point to talk about the goal of Project 2025. Ideally, to the authors, Trump and his team would read this book, follow the advice given herein, and enact the policies that they give. How likely is that? Like I said, it's probably not terribly likely that Trump is going to read it, but odds are that at least a few people working on the Trump team are going to be considerate of what the Heritage Foundation has to say. I doubt it would be a playbook for the administration, but I also don't doubt that certain people in certain positions of power would use parts of Project 2025, would use parts of this book upon assuming power. If nothing else, Project 2025 promises a list of names to fill positions with people that will be trained on how to be effective government officials by Project 2025. So, if nothing else, it's a nice tool for the Trump administration, assuming they win the election. It's a good tool for them to use to fill out positions in government. This takes us to page 34 on the PDF and to the foreword, which I think is like page 1. A Promise to America by Kevin D. Roberts, PhD. There is a comparison of today to the late 1970s, which I don't know, really. I mean, I wasn't there. You can tell what the concerns are by this statement, though. Quote, look at Americans under the ruling and cultural elite today. Inflation is ravaging family budgets, drug overdose deaths continue to escalate, and children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism with drag queens and pornography invading their school libraries. Unquote. This isn't just a political battle, this is a cultural battle. Conservatives see the current cultural climate and they see it as a problem. And they believe that they can find a political solution to it. Andrew Breitbart, love him or hate him, made one of the most important contributions to political thought in the last generation by simply noting that politics is downstream from culture. I don't believe that that is an original thought to Breitbart, but he definitely popularized it. And with that in mind, I'm curious as to what solutions the Project 2025 people have. Are they going to try to change culture using force, which is ultimately the language of politics? Guess we'll find out. Another quote that I find informative, contemporary elites have even repurposed the worst ingredients of 1970s radical chic to build the totalitarian cult known today as the Great Awakening, unquote. This is the demonization of the woke. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I'm wondering if they're going to expand upon what they consider to be woke. Woke, a lot of the times, just seems to be a boogeyman that right-wingers complain about when something offends their sensibilities. Sometimes, maybe, it's warranted, but it seems to me to include so much crying wolf that I'm not sure if I would trust them if there was something actually objectionable. Jumping forward a bit, we get another list. This is a good list. Quote, as such, the authors express consensus recommendations already forged, especially along 4 broad fronts that will decide America's future. 1. Restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. 2. Dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. 3. Defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. 4. Secure our God-given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty. Unquote. Well, let's look at this first one. Let's see what they have to say about restoring the family as a centerpiece of American life. They say that the point of centralizing political power is to subvert the family. First, of course, the idea of centralizing power is something of a right-wing critique of the left. In my opinion, the right is often hypocritical in this regard. they want to centralize the things that they want to do. But if the left centralizes things that conservatives don't like, they'll criticize it as centralization instead of saying it's just centralizing the wrong things. For example, how many conservatives want a federal law outlawing abortion? That's centralization. Any federal law or regulation is, to a degree, some kind of centralization. In my experience, conservatives aren't against centralization, they are just opposed to what the left wants to centralize. Project 2025 talks a good game. Centralizing is bad. Most of the things that we do as people, as Americans, aren't centralized. They aren't the government. Society is not the government. It is not the state. Society is community, it's family, it's voluntary relationships that we have with each other. I tend to agree with this assessment, which is why I am a libertarian anarchist, but I doubt that the writers of Project 2025 would agree with my very radically decentralized agenda. 2025 says that the president must use their power to reverse this crisis that they see. You have to eliminate marriage penalties in welfare programs and in the tax code. There should be work requirements for food stamps, and you should go further. The federal government must, quote, elevate family authority, formation, and cohesion as their top priority, and even use government power, including through the tax code, to restore the American family, unquote. Project 2025 said that the left is threatening civil society, and to combat them, the conservative government must get rid of particular terms from federal rules and regulations. Federal law, federal regulations should be bereft of the following to protect civil society. Quote, sexual orientation and gender identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights. Unquote. This would, in effect, deprive the federal government from making rules or legislation designed to help or hinder based on race, gender, sexuality, health care related to pregnancy and childbirth, and there's even a blanket statement thrown in there to cover anything that they haven't thought of. From a certain point of view, that's exactly what a lot of small government types would like to see happen. However, pairing this with the earlier bit of supporting the American family as the cornerstone of American society, I can't help but wonder what they would think of, I don't know, say same-sex married couples. Where would they fit in Project 2025? Project 2025 continues by saying that porn is bad. I wish I were being at all sarcastic, but there it is. Porn, you see, it is manifested today, this is a quote, manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, unquote. Porn is apparently not free speech, it is not property rights, it is not sexual liberation. Anyone involved in porn, from production to consumption, is either a child predator or a misogynist. Porn should be illegal, much like many drugs are illegal. I'm sure that this centralized decision about pornography will have no unintended consequences, much like drug or alcohol prohibition have had nothing but positive effects. I am, of course, being sarcastic. Moving on to schools. They say that schools should serve the parents, not the other way around. Fair enough. In order for this to be the case, school choice must be universal. Until then, the president should cut off federal funding for schools that disagree with what the central government says. For example, critical race theory and gender ideology should be excised from public school curricula. Presumably, if a parent wanted to send their child to the Queer Critical Race Academy with their school choice tax dollars, I suppose this would be fine with these particular conservatives. I kind of doubt that, to be honest. 2025 also tells us that reassigning the sex of a minor is child abuse. I have issues with this statement, at the very least. This is an overly broad statement that seeks to centralize healthcare decisions in the federal government. I'm also definitely not qualified at all to talk about the medical aspects of this issue. And I think that's kind of the point. Whenever we're looking at these kind of things, I want to leave this to people who know what they're talking about. I don't want to leave it to people who have no idea about any of the science or anything behind it, such as myself. Project 2025 continues to say that public, that is government-run, institutions shouldn't declare racist, sexist, or religiousist statements. I do have a question here from the libertarian anarchist in me. If a private school is getting government funding, which is that school choice thing we were talking about, how public now is that private school? For example, could a private Catholic school receive government funding and still proclaim the superiority of the Catholic faith? If the answer is yes, they could still do that and everything is fine. Could a private Muslim school receiving government funding, etc., could they proclaim the superiority of Islam? What about our aforementioned private Queer Critical Race Academy? Could they still get public funding? How public is a private school that gets public funding? I'm not sure. Maybe the answers will be later on in our dear text. After all, we still have still over 900 pages to go. Maybe it's in there somewhere. Project 2025 states that the federal government should centralize power in order to combat big tech, to do what the writers of Project 2025 wants them to do. Look, there are some really good reasons to keep your children away from the internet, from social media particularly. I think that it would be good if you did. And if necessary, if you want to have this discussion with me, I'll have it with you. We can argue a little bit back and forth. I will try to persuade you to keep your child of 12 years old off of social media. I don't want to use a strong arm of the state to do that. I don't want to force you to do that. The final word of the state is a bullet from the barrel of a gun, and frankly, there aren't that many things I can think of worth getting to that point. Keeping your child off of Twitter is one of those things. Project 2025 tells us that the overturning of Roe v. Wade is a great pro-family win. Roe v. Wade, of course, was the centralized power grab by the liberal Supreme Court justices to give an admittedly crappy reasoning to legalize abortion. To combat that, conservatives must not only attempt to convince their friends and neighbors that abortion is bad, they must not only attempt to get local and state laws adjusted to prevent abortions, but to combat that evil liberal centralizing agenda of allowing abortion, conservatives need to centralize the power in the federal government to criminalize abortion. Constitutionality be damned. Look, abortion is a complicated issue for many, many people. I'm not going to pretend to have all of the answers about it. Roe v. Wade was terrible law. Whether you agreed with the final result of it or not, Roe v. Wade was just bad law. The proper constitutional place for abortion law is in the states, which is one thing I think conservatives might have right about that. If conservatives want to criminalize abortion, the proper constitutionally conservative way to do that is via constitutional amendment. I understand that they might be frustrated, but there are not enough people, not enough states to agree with the conservative idea of fetal personhood to pass such an amendment. Really, if abortion is murder, then a disturbingly large percentage of people in the United States think that murder is okay. You're not going to win this argument probably in the next 40 years, let alone the next 4. But if you want some advice, don't just give accusations and condemnations. Give alternatives, give solutions, give good trade-offs. Maybe even compromise a little bit. You could do the traditional, one might even say conservative thing, and say that abortion should be illegal past the quickening, which is around 16 to 20 weeks for most mothers. I'm not endorsing any particular policy position, but politically speaking, I think that the less conservatives say about abortion on a national level, the better it will be for conservatives. Again, if they want to win this part of the culture war, they're going to have to fight it in the cultural space, not in the political space. I will end this episode with this final sentence. Quote, "In summary, the next president has a moral responsibility to lead the nation in restoring a culture of life in America again." Unquote. I don't think that is a job that the president, whether conservative or liberal or progressive or what have you, is capable of doing. The president can certainly do things to destroy a culture of life, but outside of eliminating various legislations and regulations that destroy civil society, they can't really do much to actively create it. Civil society, culture, however you want to call it, it's created by the people on the ground in society, not from above, not from those on top. Like Project 2025 said earlier, centralizing power subverts the family. It subverts civil society. One of the more recent phenomena is conservatives abandoning their, admittedly oftentimes hypocritical, limited government approach and are only kind of paying lip service to it anymore. They have, I think, in many cases, tried to use the One Ring for what they see as good. I don't think it's going to work out for them nearly as well as they want. Until next episode, take it easy.